Welcome to the space where we reveal our personal humanity to reconnect with our shared humanity. And I know I say this every podcast, but it is an honor, a pleasure to welcome Desiree Peterkin Bell, President and CEO of DPBell Associates. And it's a PR firm, but it's so much more than that because it's led by this incredible human. Desiree, thank you. Thank you for taking your time. I know it's valuable. And for me to have you as a guest on Hidden Human, like I said, it's a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for having me. I'm excited. I'm a fan of you, your work, and your ability to tell amazing stories and narratives. So thank you.
Oh, God, you got me choked up already. Okay, so PR, that can be many things. So if I were a 6-year-old child, how would you explain to me in a way I can understand what it is that you do?
Yeah. So what's interesting is actually DP Bell Associates is a public affairs firm
Thank you. Thank you.
where we do PR as I guess, an offering of our team and our company. So when I explain public affairs, people usually get confused, but I explain it this way, which is I remind people of what happened in 2020, the unfortunate time in this country. I call it America's racial reckoning, right? Where a number of folks woke up and realized that racism is there. Ding, ding. Because they saw it on TV, or they saw the death of George Floyd, or they heard the story of Breonna Taylor, or they saw Ahmaud Arbery, you know, and that story as well. And so public affairs really is about making impact. And so what we do is we ensure that the stories that are often happening in communities that are marginalized, people who usually are defined as voiceless or don't have all the power in society, we make sure those stories, those experiences, those injustices get highlighted to make a difference.
Gotcha. And thank you for correcting me on public affairs because that is a confusing thing, right?
Yeah,
I
very much.
think a lot of people conflate that. So that explanation was beautiful. And I remember after George Floyd's murder, like I've been on this journey of being an aspiring ally. I call myself that because I believe allies truly need to earn it and put their, skin in the game every day. But it started when I was 19 and I was looking around, I was like, hold on a second. Why am I getting this? And my like that doesn't make sense to me. And when that happened, un, unfortunately, like that's when people woke up. But you and I both know that it's been going on for hundreds of years, if not millennia.
Yeah, the foundation of this country is built on stolen land. That's number one. And so, you know, against the whole people. And then this country was built on the backs of another people. So, I mean, it's intrinsic and it's embedded in the culture of American society. So, just because you don't see it every day doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but it's the foundation of who we are as a nation, unfortunately.
100%. And I will tell you, meeting you a couple of years ago, Desiree has a extremely powerful and impactful and palpable presence that, just being in the same room as you, to me, was a positive impact. Like you changed me the moment I was in your orbit. And what I'm wondering, because I noticed that you have a very soft, fun underbelly. Like if you anybody who is not following Desiree on Instagram, do that because there's a video of her dancing on the White House lawn. And I'm like, yes, man. But what I'm wondering is being a member of marginalized communities and doing the work that you're doing, how do you protect your energy and your peace doing that challenging work?
Yeah, I have to find unique ways. The other thing is I'm an empath, right?
Me too.
So I feel deeply, um, and like I can't even explain it. I feel it in my body and in my soul, you know. So it is, and when you are in this work, you see things that the average person doesn't see, and it stays with you in your spirit and your mind and your aura, and you have to still function, right? And I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, you know. So I still have to function in society while also having seen or having been told these things. And so for me, I often find my place in space or peace near water. Water rejuvenates me. So I find something. And I'm not talking about a fountain. Okay. I'm not talking about a fountain. I'm talking about like a river, a sea, a beach, you know, like sometimes I will go and just sit and look at the Hudson, right? New York. But it brings me a calming spirit because I need to sometimes just settle myself. So there's that, and then there's also my daughter. My daughter is she's an amazing young woman, just turned 16. And I look at everything that I do, and I do it for her. Right? I want her to have a better world to live in. I want her to be unabashed, unapologetic about who she is, what she wants to do, and how she stands and shows up in the world as a young Black woman. And so to be able to do that, if I have to be uncomfortable a little bit to give my daughter the freedom and the opportunities to be able to have that space, then that's a small price to pay. But for me to rejuvenate, I usually find water, or I also, as you mentioned before, I will find joy in something because we have to. So when I was in the White House a couple of days ago, I had meetings all day in DC. Some of them were good, some of them were a little more challenging. But by the end of the evening, I was invited by the president and Vice President Kamala Harris to go to the White House for the Juneteenth celebration. And so I just had to find my own joy and peace, right? And so I danced on the White House lawn, and that was my peace for that moment. And so I find it wherever I can get it.
Yeah, I first of all, I love that. Let's give a shout out to your daughter and wish her a happy U Day. So happy U Day, Kaylin. What an example of leadership you have in your mom. I mean, kids learn what you show them. I'm not a mother, but watching you, how lucky is she to have you as a role model? And as far as dancing on the White House lawn, so my husband did 20 years in the military, 10 years in food industry, 2 years in finance, and now he's teaching seventh and eighth grade math and science in West Philadelphia. And yeah, and there have been a couple of times, Desiree, where I've woken up in the middle of the night to him sobbing, right? Because he said it's the hardest job he's ever done. So we have this practice when he comes home. What were the glimmers today? What were the glimmers? And for me, you dancing on the White House lawn was just a huge glimmer. I love that. So, Desiree, can you share a pivotal moment in your career that significantly shaped your leadership style?
Yes, actually. And it was also life changing. So it's a little bit of a long story, but I'm going to truncate it a little bit. All right. So many, 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 many years ago, I wanted to be an attorney. And so I actually worked at Skadden Arps. I worked on a U.S. tobacco case and a Christie's and Sotheby's price fixing case. And so I made money, but it was something I did not enjoy. And so I left. I had what's called a quarter life crisis. I talk about these a lot because I do believe that it exists. And I went back to school and got a master's in public policy. And that's when I started my official career in government. I had done a bunch of other things. I'd worked for Congressman Rangel. I had interned with a couple of other folks in New York City as well. But my first official, like, real big job after getting my master's degree was working with Bart Peterson in Indianapolis. And then I came home to work for Bloomberg um, in 9/11. After 9/11, I wanted to help rebuild my city. And so um, it was an amazing experience. It was one of the hardest jobs I ever had in my life, helping to rebuild New York City, working in that administration. But the one pivotal moment that happened for me was in July, and the anniversary is coming up, July 2003, um, where I walked into City Hall with a good friend of mine who was a councilman at the time. His name was Councilman James Davis. And for the administration, I was essentially what you would call an in-house lobbyist, right? So I helped to pass a lot of laws and legislation on behalf of the administration, or worked with the city council, 51 city council members, to pass laws and legislation that the administration could support. So one of those was the smoking ban. So I did the smoking ban in New York City, tort reform, and the film tax credit. Those are my three big marquee pieces of legislation. And one of my partners in that from the other side was Councilman James Davis. He was from Brooklyn, and he was a former police officer. He had fought against the establishment, and he was running for reelection. And so we walked into City Hall together one day with another gentleman who was impeccably dressed, kind of weird and eerie. And James Davis introduced him to me. And we walk into City Hall and we go into the City Council chambers and we walk up to the second floor of the chambers. And then this man, whose name I don't say publicly, and I never have over the years, but he shot Councilman James Davis right in front of me in City Hall. And then he turned around and pulled the gun on me. And I tell people this all the time. I grew up in New York City. I'm from Brooklyn. I went away to high school on scholarship, but I'm New York through and through. So I'm pretty street smart. That moment when you have workplace violence happening, it takes you out of your element. If I was in the street, I would know what to do. When you're in City Hall, it's a frozen moment. It's not supposed to happen. And so I literally froze. And at that time, there was an officer who was assigned to City Hall, the City Council chambers, who took a shot that everyone said it was a 1 in a million shot, and he actually killed the gentleman, but saved all of our lives. And so in that moment, in terms of leadership, now think about me for a second. I had made a career change, right, where I thought I wanted to be an attorney, had a quarter life crisis, went back to school to get a master's degree, worked in government, thought I really found my footing there, right, working in, the largest city in America, one of the most prominent figures, and advising one of the most prominent figures in America and in the world at that time. And then this happens to me, and now I question myself. Did I make the right decision? Politics, policy, government. Is this really where I want to be? Is this normal? What happens to me? What happened to me? And so I really had to question what kind of leader I wanted to be. And I used it, to be honest, as an opportunity. I wasn't good for about 2 weeks. So I'm going to keep it real. I was out. I was out of it. I was out of it for 2 weeks. But after I came to, with the support of a lot of people, I really had to decide how I want to show up, if I want to allow obstacles and people who have severe insecurities to impede progress. And I answered that question and I said, no matter what, I will stay in this industry. No matter what, I will continue to make a difference. And as you see in my career, I've had some really significant challenges. That was probably my hardest one. But since then, I've faced many different things with people who had severe insecurities. But what that has taught me through leadership is, very few leaders often stand in the face of adversity and don't do well, right? If you are a leader, you have to face adversity. If you are a leader, you are basically saying, I am apt to actually be in a position to make a significant change, to push against authority sometimes and the status quo, to make things happen and to make impact. And so that has been kind of the trail of my life, which is really understanding that my leadership is about pushing against the grain, pushing against what a lot of people will say are significant obstacles with severe people, people who have severe insecurities, to make things happen. And I always go back to my Bible. Sorry, but
Why are you sorry?
I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person.
Me too. Me too. I'm a recovering Catholic.
Okay.
That's
Well,
right. So we get the Cliff Notes version of the Bible,
right.
So I totally, please, like, it's all about that, because that's part of our lives, you know? Keep
But
going.
I tell people, heavy is the head that wears a crown. So when you're talking about leadership and being in a leadership position, you are in the front. And in the front, you're going to take some daggers. You're going to get people who are going to come for you. You're going to get people who are going to try to destroy you. You're going to get people who are going to try to discredit you. You're going to get people who are going to try to ridicule you. That is the nature of the work. but you determine how strong of a leader you are given the power that you yield and how hard you keep pressing forward to get the job done and to make the most impact.
I mean, I first of all, the thing that I'm so sorry you went through that. Um, I'm a big believer that the universe, God, whatever your belief system is, will put you in pain to get you to shift and does it in the form of a situation where you can't look away, right? The other thing that really stood out for me was that 2 weeks, like I was attacked when in 1995. I'm still in therapy, and I probably will be forever. So the fact that you were able to bounce back, it is amazing. And then the other thing is, as you were saying, you're from New York. There's an invisible thread. There just is. I was born in Hempstead. My dad's from Manhasset, and my mom's from Brooklyn.
Oh,
So
wow. Brooklyn.
yeah, I know
Okay,
Brooklyn.
old
Shout out.
Brooklyn. I always tell that. Old Brooklyn.
Yeah, man. So her house was on 79th Street and Colony Road. My grandfather was a doctor and would practice medicine out of their basement. So, I've been to the house a bunch of times, but obviously the family doesn't own it. But thank you so much for sharing that story. So, how would you describe your leadership philosophy and how do you think it's evolved over time?
I have given myself a lot more grace, I think. I think sometimes as leader, so three things. Number one, grace, authenticity, and vulnerability, right? Because I think sometimes what I have come to learn, right, is I'm 46 years old now. I have been in some really interesting places and spaces, coveted rooms and all that good stuff. Um, and people see that and they see the bright and shiny, but they don't see what it took to get there. And so I think what we have to do as leaders, right, in whatever field you're in, is tell the full and unabashed story about. Don't scare people, but tell them the truth, right? Because it's not, when people see me dancing on the White House lawn, well, they don't know what it took for me to even be in the space, right? What I had to do to get in the space. And it's not about the invite, but it's about being recognized for the work that you do in this country every single day that is recognized by the president and vice president to celebrate the power of what Juneteenth means in this country. So I always say, those three things, vulnerability for me is I'm learning to be more um, publicly vulnerable because I think that's really important. Um, I think it was Nikki Giovanni. I don't want to misquote her, but I think she says, if you don't tell people are hurt, they'll think you enjoyed it. And so, one of the things I want to tell folks is if something happens and you don't like it, speak on it, right? Don't just go smiling every day. No, 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 no. This happened. This is unfair. This did not make me happy. No, I'm not happy every single day. I'm a human being. I'm offended, right? And so I think as leaders, we have that role, and we also have that responsibility to share our vulnerability, because also will help the folks who are coming behind us or who are standing right next to us, who so desperately or who want to do what we're doing, be our partners or our allies as well. If I tell my allies, and you were saying earlier, you define yourself as an ally. One of the things for me is I always say I like allies, but I like accomplices better.
I'd prefer to be an accomplice because it's a little like this,
Yes,
right?
yes.
The going back to the insecure people and by the way, I'm 48, so I was like, damn. And let me just ask you, when you were significantly younger, and I'm talking about like between the ages of 8 and 14, the adults that we knew didn't look like this, right? So when I turned 40, I was like, "Ooh, this skin feels like." I'll take a line from Beyonce, "I feel cozy in my skin." Like it just, so, for me, that shift to, an older way of life or a more seasoned, let's say
Yeah,
that,
season.
seasoned way.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I will say this: my mother has some good bones, so that whole line, they got some good bones. So that whole line looked all right. My grandmother was 90 years old and her skin had just started to turn. So, but what I say is the stress of it all, right? I think what I saw is when folks got older, the more stress and the less they took care of themselves, particularly in communities that look like mine, because the world was more challenging for them. And so, going back to your question as a leader, one of the things I want to do is I even tell some of my younger folks this: you can't save the world if you can't save yourself. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And so you don't need to go to the spa every day, but what you may need to do is find your peace at that moment before you go back out there in the street and start marching and start, going up to the Capitol and start writing that legislation and start right to be able to do that effectively. You need to be able to find a little bit of energy to keep inside of you and find your peace. So, in terms of leadership, I think that that's part of being vulnerable, though, about how difficult this work is sometimes, and and how difficult life is. Listen,
Yeah, life does life.
life's.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't agree with you more. I mean, the 2 when am working with leaders, my philosophy, and I always say to my clients, "If it resonates with you, take it, make it your own. If it doesn't, leave it in the session." But I believe there are 2 pillars of leadership. One is energy management, the other is emotional regulation, right? If you can get those 2 in line, then everything else kind of falls into place. But people will say things, Desiree, and I'm sure that you've heard this, is fill your cup. You got to go fill your cup. I don't believe in that. I believe that your cup should be as close to 100% as possible. People get your overspill. So, like if you're walking down Market Street in one direction, you're operating at 90% energy, and I'm coming down in the other direction and I'm at 110%, and I energetically bump into you and my extra 10% pours into you, we're both operating at 100%, right? But you got to keep that cup as close to possible. Um, so I agree with that. But and I also say self-care is not selfish, it's selfless, because you have more of yourself to give if you,
You have to.
keep your, yeah.
You have to, but
So
I will say it is harder for some folks than others, right? And I do, I do want to mention that because the reality is that some folks have, and I think about this in terms of communities, right? You have, there's a reason why Black men die at a faster rate than white men, right? It's the stress of life. It's the stress of racism. It's the stress of discrimination. It's the stress of society because they don't necessarily have all of the tools and resources at their disposal to be able to find their peace and their calm. So there is a level of requirement, I think, for different communities to do a little bit more because we traditionally haven't had it. We haven't been able to. So it literally is us taking it, right? So I tell folks, even who have our 9 to 5 job, don't take your vacation, and then when you take your vacation, you're on vacation. Don't work on it. That's one mistake I did, right? Um, I've worked in 4 different administrations, and I've worked with, at the highest levels of government, working closely with the White House as well, and the Pope and Pope Francis and entertainment icons and everyone like that, and who've been able to reach out to me at any point in time. And so when you do that, you're very accessible, and that's okay. But you also have to make yourself inaccessible to keep your peace and to find your space. And so that is something that we have to do.
yeah, yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because when I went and read my book of fables at Bryan's school, it's Ad A.B. Anderson in West Philly. And I remember walking into the office, and one of the administrators there, and I don't want to use her name because I don't know if I'm allowed to. She and I get along really well. And I looked at her, I said, "You okay?" And she's like, "Oh, Kelly." And so I taught her a quick free technique to kind of bring her central nervous system back online. And she looked at me and she goes, "Does your husband know that you're a keeper?" And I said, "Well, thank you very much. But if you ever need anything, here's my card. Please call me. It's my gift to you." But you're exactly right. There's definitely a disparity to that. So who are leaders that have inspired you the most, and what lessons have you taken from them?
So interesting because some of my leaders are not here anymore. So Barbara Jordan is, when I was younger, I loved her, but I still love her. She was the first person to deliver a powerful speech at a Democratic National Convention, um, from the South. Um, and so she was elected from Texas, representing Texas. And her oratory skills were so powerful. And she challenged the status quo, and she was not afraid to do so. And I just remember listening to old speeches of her and thinking that she was authentically always herself. Another person for me, again, is Sojourner Truth. And again, questioning the paradox in American society, right? Where women at the time were fighting for women's rights, but she gets on the stage and she says, well, ain't I a woman too? As a Black woman. And so, again, I love people who, in terms of leadership styles, or um, who force the conversation to be had, and bring something completely different to the table. Another person, Shirley Chisholm, right? There was just a movie made about her, and um, Regina King was played her, and it was remarkable. But again, challenging the status quo, and I realized that it's all Black women. um, and that's because I see myself in them. Because I always say this, I realize I drink deeply from wells I did not dig. And so it's because of them and their stories, their trials and tribulations, but their challenges, that I'm able to be who I am, and to question as hard as I can question those same kinds of things here at some of the tables. So those would be my three folks. I do carry their words with me. I carry their spirit with me, and I also try to impart that with my daughter. Um, Living, I would say, let me see first. I hate the fact that we look at things sometimes when folks are gone. Um, but I think there's still a lot to be said about some folks who are still here. I think they're still developing, even, to be honest. But those are the three folks that I would say make for powerful leaders, who challenged authority, who showed up authentically as themselves, and literally the cultural, political, and community landscapes have changed because of them for the better.
And because of you. And
Oh,
because of you. So I've had the privilege of hearing Desiree speak twice, and both times I was choked up and moved to tears. So when you say you carry their words, you embody their energy. I mean, you left an indelible handprint on my heart, and I know you do that wherever you go. Sorry, I'm
thank
getting
you.
a little
No, I
misty.
appreciate that. I do. And I'm learning more now and it might be getting more comfortable with age. I'll be honest with you, right? Because I think the older you get, the number one, the older you get, the less F's you care, right?
Yep.
Like that's
Yep.
sorry,
Yep.
right? It's like I am who I am. It is what it is. But you also feel, like I said before, that you can share more stories and more authenticity through your own experiences, and being able to share that with rooms and with people, particularly women. I'll be honest with you, particularly women, is energizing. Um, and you also realize that you find that other folks are either have a similar experience, or people have been wanting and waiting for you to say what you're saying because they feel the same way.
Yeah, and for I mean, I literally love everything you're saying, and I know we're like our time is rapidly like coming to an end, and I'm like, oh my God, I could talk to you for 3 hours. But I'm all about vulnerability, and I hid for a long time because I just thought, well, I was taught, oh, what you're saying is powerful, but your timing's terrible, or you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, you're too, and all of those twos that were labeled on me are what make me a great coach, right? Being empathic, being hypersensitive. But in terms of vulnerability, it was really what jumped in my head was last year. At this time, I was at the National Security Seminar at U.S. Army War College, and I was one of 160 civilians invited, right? You have to get invited. And I walk in this room, Desiree, and I'm like, literally, why am I here? There's the head of Boeing. Go with God, my friend. You got a lot of stuff on your plate right now. Lockheed Martin, 3M, all of these things. And I walked up to this table of 2 white guys, bless their hearts. And I walked over and I was like, "Yeah, I don't know why I'm in this room because I," and they looked at me and thank God for them. They were like, "We're feeling the same way, Kelly." Like,
Really?
yeah, and it just kind of diffused that anxiety because people are feeling like that, 70% of the global population has imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean,
I tell people, "Don't just look at the people's social media, honey. They lying."
oh, yeah, they're curating it. So, one of my favorite things is the only time I use a filter is on Zoom, and it's really because 'cause I'm lazy, because I don't wanna do makeup, like, I want my skin to breathe, but when I'm doing things on social media, I'll do it after a workout class with sweat or, there was one where I was like, "Here's my co-host, Mr. Zit." You know what I mean? Like, because I don't want people to look at the curated fancy. I want them to see the whole of me, right? Um, but in terms of adapting to change, so you and I have lived almost 5 decades, right?
Right.
Um, how do you navigate significant periods of change, and what do you do to kind of navigate them?
So I've had to take, well, I'll just use my business as an example. So we've had to make some changes in the business. And part of that, I think everyone was impacted by COVID,
Yeah.
right? So that's just a
Oh, yeah.
reality. So when you're a small business, you're impacted even more by COVID. And so we had to learn to be nimble. And when I say nimble, I mean we literally took a step back, assessed where we wanted to be in the world, to be honest. And I did what a lot of people may not have done, and we actually expanded during COVID.
We did too.
Yeah, we expanded and we expanded on the continent of Africa. And we began doing work in about 15 countries. And so, really focusing and targeting specifically on Ghana and Nigeria. And so, we began working with a lot of community organizations, a lot of young people. We did content development and creating strong narratives to tell powerful stories from folks who are doing amazing work. Um, and also trying to change the narrative. A lot of Americans, unfortunately, have really messed up conceptions about uh, Africa, right? Like Africa is a continent and with many different countries. I always tell people, so every country has its own culture, and so that's some of the basic education. But for us, we had to learn to be nimble, and I think we learned to connect our nimbleness with our desire for impact, right? And that's what I say that my team and I built, which is, our broad mantra is we work with people who want to make a difference, brands that matter, and movements, not moments.
Yes, that was another thing that I was like, "She is just you are, literally a poet and a wordsmith." I
Thank
mean, I
you.
just sorry if this is a whole, like, fan club here for
No,
Desiree,
I
but
listen. I love it because I get enough people on the other side. So
Yeah. Well, I'm a fan, I'm a huge fan, but
thank
I have
you.
to tell you a really funny story, so and I can't use this child's name because he's 8th grade, right? So, I read Mirabat's Fables, which I would love to send you a copy, so please send me your
Please.
mailing address.
Yes.
And our good friend Ernest gave me a beautiful quote for the back, so, but so I'm reading, a fable about a unicorn named Aurora, and Aurora is based on a colleague of mine who used to work high up in AstraZeneca, and she's Afro Latina. She would get these raving, glowing reviews. And at the end, before she left, HR would say to her, "Could you straighten your hair? Because it's a little bit unruly and distracting." So I had this idea about a unicorn that was born with a black tourmaline horn and a black curly mane and tail, while all the other unicorns white, straight, right, with a gold horn. And basically, the corporate stall space demanded that Aurora paint her horn and straighten her mane and tail. And what happened to her? So I'm talking to this group of eighth graders, and after the end was over, I walked over to this one young man and I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Liberia." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's Africa." Like and he's looking at me like, "Okay, wait, lady, you don't know where this
Right.
is, right?" Then I said to him, "How's your jollife?" And he looked at me and he was like, "Kelly, I will tell you, I don't care what any other country says, our jollife is the best. It is
Yes, I'm
award winning."
sure.
And I was like,
Just don't run into a Ghanaian or a Nigerian.
right? Well, and my husband being a former professional chef, like I'm really a big believer that food really expresses and connects you to the culture.
I will share, and I've been doing this for years, so 100% right. So, one of my passion projects is called Desiree Chat and Choose. We've been doing these all over the world since 2016. And the reason why is because after the election, so for many who don't know, I wrote the bid for the Democratic National Convention to be, I was one of the authors to be held in Philadelphia in 2016. And so I had to, so Philadelphia was chosen, obviously, and that was the last live convention. The convention this year is the next live convention. The last 4 years, it was virtual because of COVID. And so I wrote the bid and had to help to execute everything that we said we could do. So it was an amazing convention. Obviously, everyone knows what happened during the election. And when the stats came out with the election about who voted for who, particularly about where white women voted, I was physically angry, physically, like physically. So I couldn't walk because every person that I walked by, real talk, every white woman that I walked by in the street, I was like, it was you. And I was like, I can't function this way. The tension in my
Mhm.
shoulders is building. And so I decided to put together these conversations around food with women who have literally nothing in common but just being women. And so we started in Pennsylvania. We actually went to Western Pennsylvania and we had our first conversation. And I put a call out. I didn't know what I was doing. And so our first conversation was with a woman who was a self defined white supremacist, a single mother, African American single mother, and another woman who was in law enforcement, and another woman who graduated from HBCU, and then like a housewife or a
Yeah.
domestic,
Yeah.
yeah, housewife. She called herself a housewife. So, and we just started with this basic conversation, and they all agreed to participate. I had no idea what I was doing, but fast forward, I have now had probably about maybe a little over 100 of these kinds of conversations all over the world, all over the United States around food. And we chose food because the one thing that we know people can agree on is
Yeah.
most people need to eat,
Yes.
right? We may not agree on everything else, but some people need to eat. And most, even if you're just eating bread and water, you have to eat something. And so what we have found is that food actually allows folks to be more comfortable. You know, when you're breaking bread with someone, they see that as a formal way of building a relationship with you, even if they don't know you. And they're more apt to share a little bit more with you if they're breaking bread with you. And so we've been able to have these amazing conversations. I'm not sure what we're going to do with the data yet. But we are at some point we're going to release the data because I think it's fascinating. Internationally, we've gone to Bermuda, Panama, Mexico, uh, Italy. I'm missing one more. I'm missing one more, but I'm gonna make Greece. We've done this internationally as well. So food, yes, food is a very good convener.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And I love that. And I like in my head, my little selfish child is like, I want to get invited to
Right?
that.
You gotta
And I
invite.
will tell
Yes,
you,
yes,
I was pissed is not like good enough. I was angry with the fire of 1,000 suns at my fellow white women. And I like I am somebody who will go toe to toe with a Karen in a
yeah.
heartbeat. And like my biggest fear is becoming one. And our our shared friend Ernest Owens was like, You're not a Karen. Get it out of your head. And, but I'm here to say on this podcast, 10% of us need to shift our vote and then we're good. Because honestly, ladies, it is on white women to fix this. It is. And they've come after all of us. So nobody is safe. Um, but since we're on food, do you mind if I ask you 4 rapid fire
No,
questions? Is
no,
that
please.
okay?
Hopefully I have answers. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. So what's your favorite comfort food?
I would say mac and cheese, homemade mac and cheese.
With crust or no?
With crust, yes.
Yeah, man. Uh-huh, uh-huh. Now I have a gluten intolerance, so usually it's like, "Oh, well, I guess the next 8 hours is just gonna be bad.
Yes, it's just gonna be us.
Sorry, babe, I love you, but yeah, I'm not gonna refrain for that." Okay, so what books are on your playlist? I'm sorry, what books are on your nightstand?
I would say the Bible is one. Power by Robert Greene. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings by Maya Angelou.
One of my faves.
Those are probably be the three that don't move. I have books that move, and I have friends who've written, but Ernest has written a book.
Yeah.
Another friend, Disha Dyer, has written a book. I have folks who've written books, but the three books I don't ever move, those are the three.
Yeah, and I know why The Cage Burns Sings is one of my favorites. It's very hard for me to read. It is very hard for me to read because as a sexual assault survivor, like, and what's interesting is I didn't realize this, Desiree, but in the Black community, y'all don't talk about that.
No, it's not. It's a number of things. But again, like I said, that's why I love the work that we do, because we actually help to tell us those stories, right? Whether it is violence, whether it's sexual violence, whether it's physical violence, whether it's mental anguish and violence, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's disparity in funding. We help tell those stories because historically they have been not given the opportunity to be highlighted in a mass media way. And so that's what we try to do.
Thank you for that. As a survivor, thank you for that. Because sometimes you said you give voice to the voiceless,
Yeah.
and so, like, sometimes I'm just like, "When is this gonna
Yeah.
end?" Like, this whole thing with Diddy, I don't
Yeah.
even wanna go off on that. But okay, what songs are on your playlist?
I would say power. Uh, so that's one. Uh, I love Nipsey.
I do
Big
too.
Nip. So grinding on my life, Nipsey Hustle. And then this is I apologize, guys, for this violent one, but it is what it is. 50 Cent. Many men, many, 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 many men
Yes.
wish
Yeah.
death on me. Don't want. So anyway, um, that's a
Yeah, I love it.
song.
Keep going. We have
No, no,
time.
no, no. It's it because that's kind of that's my getting in the ring song.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's my like, all right, let's go. I know
Yeah.
people who don't want me to win or don't want me to make as much impact as I'm going to make, but I'm gonna push right through.
Oh, yeah.
Those are
I had
like my
some
three. Yeah.
I love that. My husband just recently introduced me to Big Daddy Kane and Who Am I? And I was like so my husband grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, so it's a very poor community, and, he was one of the few white faces, so, like, he's like, "Big Daddy Kane, did you not listen to this?" And I grew up in South Florida, so I would listen to NWA and Two Live Crew and things to really piss my parents off. But it was just and Nipsey Hussle, I mean,
Yeah, he was. And again,
amazing.
he did a lot of work, in the community, and never turned his back on his community where he came from. That was tragic.
It was absolutely and too many incredible Black artists have
Yeah.
we've lost, too way too soon,
Yes.
way too soon.
100%.
So, what are you most grateful for in this moment right now?
I am grateful that I have the ability to define my own time. I think there's nothing greater than that. Nothing greater than being able to define your own time. And so I get to work on the things that I want to work on. I get to make as much impact as I want to make in the areas I want to make them, um, on my own time. And I think having my own business and working with an amazing team of young women is, a joy in the world. I call us the powerful. We are a small and mighty team. We scale up when we have bigger projects, but we have a core six of us, and these ladies are some fierce ladies. They are fierce. They will stand in a line of fire at any moment, because they believe truly in what they do. But I also give them the power of time as well, because we believe in working really hard to make things happen, but also taking the time for ourselves.
Again, I feel like I've been bathing in the wisdom of Desiree for the past, hour. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to
Yes.
work with your talented and wildly fierce team, how would they do that?
So you can email me directly. I do look at all my emails. I may not respond to them all, but I look at everything. So our email address is dpb or dpbell at desireepeterkinbell.com. And then you can also go to our website, which is desireepeterkinbell.com, and contact us there. We are easily accessible, folks, and also LinkedIn, Desiree Peterkin Bell. Just find me, send me a note. We love to work with folks who are interested in making impact. Like I said, people want to make a difference, brands that matter, and movements, not moments.
I mean, I just I can't. We could go on for hours. I just have a feeling, but I just want to thank you for spending your precious time currency with us.
Thank you. And thank you for creating a platform to tell these stories and, kind of looking beyond, I say, the veil, and allowing folks to share their insights and their stories. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being vulnerable and graceful and patient and wise. I just again, I feel privileged to know you and be alive at the same time you are. And thank you to our audience for listening. It's our intention on Hidden Human to inspire you to go out and have authentic conversations to deepen the connections in your life. Thank you so much and make it a great day.